have a great segment on this show that was called Lame Duck Watch. It was something we used around this time 2 years ago, roughly, to track the lame duck presidency of George W. Bush. It was after Barack Obama was elected president, but before Obama was officially sworn into office. Despite some stiff competition on this show, I feel safe in saying that Lame Duck Watch was the best we ever did in terms of using musical interludes on this show. It was Hail to the Chief, followed by a quack. Do you remember this? People would come up to me on the street and do that. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, quack. I loved it. It's still stuck in my head 2 years later. Lame Duck Watch was our way of keeping an eye on undernoticed, underreported on things the Bush administration was doing during its final 2 months of existence. Well, now, 2 years later, we are about to enter into a new lame duck period in this country. It begins on Monday. And it's the old Congress coming back to Washington for one last hurrah before the new Congress that was just elected gets sworn in. This is a new lame duck period, so it's time to bring back the Lame Duck Watch, right? The problem is the music. We cannot use that great little musical animation anymore. We can't use da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, because that is Hail to the Chief, which is specifically for the president. And so it made sense for watching a lame duck president. It makes no sense for watching a lame duck Congress. I don't think there's Congress music. So if we're going to keep an eye on what happens in the lame duck Congress, what does the intro sound like? After much debate among the staff today, fanfare for the common man, quack. Some awesome auto-tuned remix of the gavel sound, quack. Something done 111 times very quickly, and then a quack because it was the 111th Congress. After debating all of these ideas today, we have come up with the one thing we think we can use for a new intro, maybe. Here goes.
Hell no, you can't!
Ta-da! The official Rachel Maddow Show intro, henceforth, for our coverage of the Lame Duck 111th Congress. Hell no, you can't! Here's the thing about the new Lame Duck Congress. It's still the 111th Congress. It's still this Congress. In the lame duck period, Nancy Pelosi is still Speaker of the House. Democrats still have a roughly 77-seat advantage over Republicans in the House. Even with Republican Mark Kirk of Illinois starting his term in the Senate imminently, Democrats will still have a majority, a significant majority, in the Senate. Congress doesn't begin to reflect the results of the last election until this current Congress is over and a new one is sworn in. And that does not happen until next year, until January. And so Democrats have a decision to make right now. Democrats are still in charge. What do Democrats want to accomplish with their giant congressional majorities while they still have them? You would be forgiven for not seeing it this way up until now, because if you have been listening to Republicans, they have not made it seem that way.
Hopefully, when Congress goes back into session next week, we can actually see the president come to our direction.
But between now and January 1, as things are, is there any compromise that you could make, or maybe it's not even a compromise because of your conviction on this, but is there any way you could vote for taxes to go up on anybody?
No.
Republican Congressman Eric Cantor there demanding that President Obama bow to the will of Republicans right away. To be clear, Senate Republicans were in the minority before this election. They will therefore be in the minority during the lame duck period, and they will also be in the minority when the new Congress gets sworn in January. House Republicans will be in the majority come January, but they are still in the distant minority between now and then. And between now and then is when the Bush tax cuts issue you just heard Eric Cantor talking about is going to be decided. There's so much bloviation about this tax cut issue that it is easy to forget what the details are. But the details here are determinative. When the Bush tax cuts were passed in 01 and 03, they were not paid for. They were just larded onto the deficit. That's what turned the Clinton budget surplus into the Bush budget deficit. That's what did it. That and a couple of wars and something about Medicare, but that's really what did it. And because those tax cuts weren't paid for, they had a time limit put on them. That was the only way the people who passed those tax cuts could get away with blowing that big a hole in the budget, with being that fiscally irresponsible. Those cuts had to expire at some point. They had a 10-year sunset, and that point has been reached. The Bush tax cuts are set to expire at midnight on New Year's Eve. What that means is that at no point will Republicans be controlling any House in Congress when a decision gets made on the Bush tax cuts. That decision has to be made while Republicans are still in the minority and Democrats are in control. Somebody alert Eric Cantor.
Hopefully, when Congress goes back into session next week, we can actually see the president come to our direction.
I understand why you want that, but why would he do that exactly? As we've been talking about on this show since even before the elections, this tax cuts issue is a perfect political issue for Democrats. The only difference between the two parties' positions on the tax cuts is that Republicans want really big tax cuts for the richest Americans, and they're willing to lard $700 billion onto the deficit to pay for them. Here it is in red, white, and blue, and a tiny little bit of black. All of these different lines going down the screen here represent different income groups. As you go down the line, the income level gets larger. The size of the bubble next to the income group represents the size of the tax cut. This is the two different proposals, the Democrats in blue and the Republicans in red. The blue bubble is how big the Democratic tax cut would be by income group there. The red bubble is how big the Republican tax cut would be by income group. As you can see, the Democratic and Republican plans almost exactly the same in terms of how much people get in terms of tax cuts. Under Democrats and Republicans, people are getting more or less the same amount of tax cuts. The last line you see there is for people making $500,000 to $1 million per year. Then you get to the highest earners, people making more than $1 million per year. Watch what happens under the Republican plan. Watch this. Boing. Look at that. That's the difference in the proposals. Republicans want to shower all of that on the richest Americans and pay for it by larding it onto the deficit. This is a good political issue for Democrats from Democrats' perspective. We talked about this a couple of months ago when it appears in Ezra Klein's column at the Washington Post. We called it the fat-bottomed snowman or something. But that's the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans on tax cuts. There's a lot of things that need to happen during the upcoming lame duck period. Okay, actually, we should play it. Can you guys play it?
Hell no, you can't!
I don't really know if that's going to work. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen in the lame duck period that we are about to enter into. It's not just the Bush tax cuts. It's unemployment benefits. Those have to be extended for 2 million unemployed Americans at some point next month. If Congress doesn't act, reimbursements for doctors under Medicare will drop suddenly by nearly 30%. That's something called the doc fix that they do every year. The Secretary of Defense is now calling for the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal in the Defense Authorization Act to be passed between the time the Pentagon study comes out, December 1st, and the end of the year. There also needs to be a stopgap spending bill to fund the entire government, or the government shuts down, essentially, on December 3rd. So there's a lot of stuff that they have to do. But what happens in Congress now depends on Democrats. Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, Harry Reid as Senate Majority Leader, and giant Democratic majorities in both houses that are essentially entirely intact. What happens now is Democrats sealing their legacy for what they did when they controlled both houses of Congress and Barack Obama was in the White House. Republicans get their chance starting in January. They do not get their chance starting on Monday. Joining us now is Ed Schultz, the host of MSNBC's The Ed Show. Ed, it is great to see you. Thanks for sticking around.
Thank you, Rachel. Great to be with you tonight.
You know more than I do, and I know this from watching your show, about how Democrats in Washington strategize about getting stuff done and about their agenda. Do you have a sense of what they're planning on doing with the lame duck period, what they're planning on getting done in this last 2 months?
Here's what I think the constituents, the Democratic base, want to see out of the Democrats. Get a heart, show some soul, and grow a spine. Let's talk about compromise. Just what is that? It's time to be principled for the liberal causes of this country and make sure that they deliver for the American people. I think they can do it. I think it can be a very active lame duck session. I think you got some interesting things out there. You had the Hispanics and the women come out for Harry Reid. He's committed to the DREAM Act. That'd be probably about the biggest thing they could get done on illegal immigration. You've got the middle class tax cuts. Use the term middle class as often as you can because the Republicans don't do it.
Right.
Your graphic depicts exactly what they're all about. The bottom line is that we have got a group of people in this country who are suffering, and their unemployment benefits are going to run out. Show some heart, show some soul. That's what the American people want. Americans, I believe, are good next-door neighbors.